Don't wait on this to happen before you build your own life. Hello, y'all. I'm Diana Brienne. Widowhood, divorce, loss, empty nest, anything that can create a hole where there once was something. Hello, y'all. I'm Diana Brienne. So I got to thinking about this situation where people often do not build their own life. They build their own life solely around a relationship or someone. Now, I'm a mom of 3 young adult kids, and I'm a wife of about 30 plus years. And I most certainly have built my life around my family, and I most certainly have built my life around my husband and my 3 children. And at the same time, all throughout the years, I did build my own life separate as well. That included them, but it was separate from me, and meaning that I was building something for myself. And so what I have seen a lot of, especially in women, I think it's more for women than for men, although it can happen to men too. What I have seen is that often women will build their life solely around their husband, their husband's career, their husband's relationships, their husband's activities. They will build their life exclusively around being a mom. Now, truly, I did both. I built my life around my husband, and then I built it around being a mom. I homeschooled my children. My life was my family, and I loved it, and I wouldn't change any of that for the world in hindsight because, well, for me, it was the right thing to do. I loved and embraced my family. I loved and embraced every moment of those years when my kids were little, as they were growing up. Now they're young adults. They need me as a mom, but in a much different way than they needed me, say, even 10 years ago or 15 years ago. And so I have to adjust to that new role as mom in a different way than I did before. You know, I remember when my kids were in car seats and I would have to look back and check and make sure that they were okay while I was driving, 3 in car seats at the very same time. I remember when my husband and I were newly married, I put my career on hold for his career so that we could travel the world. And that was the right thing to do. It was the right thing to do. At the same time, maybe not to the level that I would have had I been single without children, but had I continued to build into my own life. I continued to develop my own self. I continued to build friendships that were mine, you know, that included my family, but they were my friendships. I continued to build a career. I continued to, build things into my life, even though it may not have been at the level that I would have done it otherwise. I did it at some level. And yet I realized when my kids grew up, and 2 of them still live at home, but they have their own lives. You know, they work, they go to college, so they have their own lives, and yet they touch base with me. They're a part of my life. I'm a part of their life. I always will be their mom, but it's kind of a different role. I believe that families are needed to be there for each other in a time of need and a time of celebration. And the rest of the time, it's kind of like whatever it happens to be. Everybody has their own things that they do. So when my kids became adults, all of a sudden I realized, hey, I have a lot of other room now in my life. What am I going to put into it? And I went back to college at age 62. And I realize now that I did the right thing. I have a girlfriend who lost her husband recently. And about 4 or 5 months ago, she lost her husband. And it's been a real, real struggle. And she and I have had numerous conversations about this. She's glad that she built her life around her husband and around her son while he was growing up. But she said the downside of that is now that her husband is suddenly passed, she is kind of lost. She's struggling to find her own identity that is separate from, being a mom and separate from being a wife, because really her son has his own life and her husband is passed. So now she's kind of left with a big, huge empty gap, and there's a lot of loneliness in there. But out of loneliness often comes our best creativity. You know, it's just like when I go on a fast, and I talked about, you know, fast and eating and intermittent fasting. Sometimes when you come off of it, great food tastes so good. Like a piece of cabbage will taste great after being on a fast. Whereas I probably wouldn't have eaten a piece of cabbage if I had not been on a fast. I'd want something more tasty. And yet that piece of cabbage is much healthier than probably the other tasty food. So sometimes loneliness um, can get us to a heightened awareness where we appreciate and value what truly is meaningful and truly is good for us. And we just don't randomly go out there and pick junk stuff for our lives to junk it up. So getting back to the subject of building our lives, we don't want to be left holding a bag of nothing when if our kids grow up and they, you know, have their own lives, and we want them to have their own life, but we also want them to be a part of our life and us a part of their life and be there for each other. That's a good relationship. You know, people, you know, saying, okay, I'll call you mom and dad once a year. Well, I wouldn't want that. I like my kids calling me every day. And yet I want to hear about their life and what they're doing. And I'll tell them what I'm doing. And then we get together for dinner or something. You know what I'm saying? But we're there for each other, and yet we have our own lives. My husband's a golfer. He loves to golf. He golfs all the time. And the thing about it is that I'm not a golfer, but I have many other interests that I do. But we come back together and we have dinner together and do our things together. We have our own relationship built in, things that we enjoy doing together. And yet I have the things that I enjoy doing separate, and he has things that he enjoys separate. It's not that we can't be a part of those things. It's just that it's not our cup of tea. And so the more we build into our own life that's good, that is appropriate for those relationships to have, healthy friendships, good friendships, healthy activities, good activities that are compatible with married life or family life or things like that, the better. You know, the more we build our career, the better. As long as we're not, needing to be, like a full-time mom. I was a full-time mom, so that was my priority. And yet I continued slowly to build other things into my life, my education and everything like that. And so I think a lot of people are left, when they lose a spouse, whether it's through being widowed or a divorce or their kids grow up or any other kind of loss, they're kind of left with, who am I? What do I do now? How do I step back out there? And sometimes when you step back out there, you have to step back out there alone. You don't have anyone to step back out there with. But once you step back out there, even alone, you will meet other people that you have things in common. Just choose the right people for your life. And I often believe the right people also come into our lives when the timing is right. But when we have this loss or we have this big gap, it makes it harder when we don't have anything for ourselves that we've built into our life. For me, I go to the gym every day. I run every day. I go to college full time. I have, my YouTube channel. I have social groups that I go to, in addition to my husband and in addition to my family. So I do have other things in my life beyond just one relationship. And so I think it's important to embrace your family, embrace your spouse, make sure you're putting plenty of positive energy into those relationships and time into those relationships. And yet at the same time, save something for you so that you are building into your own life, which also makes you more interesting to them. Me doing all the things that I'm doing makes me more interesting to my husband. My kids are always saying, hey, Mom, let's get together for lunch, because I'm such a busy person. And I make time for them for lunch. And I get to share what I'm doing. They get to share what they're doing. So I think when some people live their life exclusively through someone else and have no interest, no goals, no anything else for themselves, that can pose an issue if there's ever an empty space. So I believe that we can have great relationships, enjoy our relationships, be there for our relationships, and embrace our relationships, and at the same time, build into our own life, our own identity as well. From my house to yours, may God bless you. I hope you like, share, subscribe, and I hope to talk to you soon again. Bye-bye.